Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's reaction episode brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat over 50 infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use our code Locked On to get $20 off your order. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you, man. Appreciate some weekend time as we look back to what went down at United Supermarkets Arena as the Red Raiders somehow, some way, find a way to win. 60-59, the final score as they improved to 3-0 in Big 12 play. Remember the last reaction episode where I told you it'd be the nicest, tidiest little box score you've ever seen? Well, this is totally the opposite. And in some ways, Chris, that's enjoyable to me as Texas Tech sees a lot of things statistically go the wrong way. There is one thing in particular that certainly went the right way and allowed them an opportunity to get that win. But we're going to have a much different conversation as far as how it happened, but thankfully very similar when it comes to the final result, which is another win. Before we dive into our thoughts, let's get thoughts on the big picture from Red Raider head coach Grant McCasland.
Really, the story's on the glass to me and our ability to get to the free throw line in a game where we needed to create some offense in different ways. We did it offensive rebounding. We did it by getting to the free throw line. And, man, Joe didn't shoot it very good. I felt like he forced some things over the course of the game, but at the end he showed a lot of patience. And even when shots weren't falling, we got good looks, which led to offensive rebound. I thought Joe's patience down there. That's why I'm telling you, this team just learns. We learn as we play. And that's what I love. Their heart is to get better. Like, we weren't discouraged by a shot going in. Let's just take Pop's shot at the end of the game. He had a great look in the corner, but it didn't discourage him. I just look at him and I'm like, is he down? He's like, nope, this dude wants to get a stop. I'm like, we're going to win. I honestly mean it. Because we let missed shots affect us early in the year. We're not doing that right now. We're just like, we're going to win the game. It doesn't matter how many you make or how many you miss. Let's just find a way.
If you saw the game, you probably have a feel for these things, but let me just run it down for you. If you need a reminder, 36% from the field, 20 from beyond the arc. You were 5 for 25, and you're 3-0 in the Big 12 Conference. Help it make sense, Chris, how they were able to pull this off.
Yeah, I mean, because I think Grant had described a lot of used a lot of words to describe his team, before this game had been played. And, he'd used words like trust and resilience and share, all those things, which had all been true to get you to that point. But then now you can add some grit and toughness to that because this is a sign. And I'm still trying to figure out how legit you are, how good are you really? But it's a sign of a good team. It just is when you don't play your best and you still figure out a way to get a result. It just is. Kansas State was very impressive. I think their length and athleticism caused you problems. You kind of had to take a detour and kind of the recipe on how to get to the result that you wanted. And it equaled toughness and grittiness. And you this is not the best rebounding team that I've seen, and that Grant knows it, and it's a bit of a weakness, and you're going to have to figure out how to team rebound, if you will, minus Devin Cambridge, and that's kind of what wins you this game. Your work. I think you out rebounded Kansas State by like 8 in the second half. I think you had, 3 or 4 more offensive rebounds than they did in the game. And your ability to your work around the rim, as tough as it was to watch in the first half, that's kind of what got you over the hump in the second. Your ability, and we can talk about some individuals here, but yeah, bottom line is you had to find a different path, and I wasn't certain that you could do it. But Kansas State's not going to be the best team in the Big 12 that you see, but I thought it was the first kind of a long line of tests against some length and athleticism, and you passed it because other than Tyler Perry, I mean, Kansas State's a big team. They've got 6'3", 6'6", 6'9", 7 foot. I mean, all over the place, and they just keep coming at you in waves. And they've got elite scoring, which we saw that at full display in the first half in the midst of that 20-0 run. I'll just say that too. I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen somebody come in and go on a 20-0 run in your building before. That was a new one for me. And teams don't typically survive that. You just don't. That's like it just doesn't happen. And yet somehow you did. And so that's one that just – and if you're Kansas State, you walk away going, oh, like how did we not figure out a way to get this done? Because that last 7 seconds that it's either they walk off head down or they run off the court and are just they've stolen one kind of and you just but instead it was the opposite. But it was it was wild day at the arena, that's for sure, because kind of saw a little bit of everything. And for a lot of it, it wasn't great for Texas Tech. But again, the end result is all that matters.
Yeah, just seeing a 20-0 run is one thing that's fairly unique. But then the team that went on the 20-0 run doesn't win the game, making it even more unique. I mean, only 22 points at the half for Texas Tech. That's just kind of astounding to see. But then you outscore them by 12 there in the second to obviously get the win. And I give you some of the ugly stuff statistically for Tech. Wasn't that way for K-State. 44% from the field, 44% from beyond the arc. But some of the things that did go right for Texas Tech, as I mentioned statistically, only 9 turnovers on the day, and you make more free throws than they attempt. You're 15 for 18. They were only 5 for 7 at the charity stripe. And I know it doesn't always, translate immediately to this, Chris, when you're able to continue to get to the free throw line. But a lot of times that translates to me to just pure relentlessness and tenacity, continuing to try to get to the hoop and force some of those calls, which I thought Texas Tech did. And maybe the prettiest thing that you're going to see from a numbers standpoint, 0 field goals for the final 3 minutes and 21 seconds of the game for the K-State Wildcats. I mean, as you heard from Coach McCaslin there, talking about Pop specifically, but you can say it about the team overall, something doesn't go right for you or a shot doesn't fall. Are they down? Are they discouraged? No, they're already thinking about getting a stop. And it was those stops that finally gave you the opportunity to get a bucket to win the game with 7.7 seconds or something like that left on the clock when it was all said and done. I feel like we get more home cooking for the visitor in our building than anybody else in America.
Yeah, the end was because there's many layers just to the ending. You were 4 of your last 5 from the field. Kansas State was 0 for their last 4, and so that's really when your defense showed up. You forced some stops, you secured rebounds, and then you just you did a good job of scoring when it mattered most, when you had to have it, and I think. I wanted to call out Darion Williams because he hits a 3. First of all, you're down 8 with 3 to go. It's not going well. Yeah, you mentioned that because, the halftime scores, I think 22. At one point, you were up 22-13.
Right.
Then you go to the locker room and you're down 33-22. So you're up 9, then down 11, and 0 momentum. And they're just making everything. I mean, from the rafters, they're just heaving them up. They're telling the bench about it. Tyler Perry's looking at the Texas Tech coaches like, should have brought me, dog. Like, hey, man, I was, I mean, it's just, and you're just like going, you just kind of sink lower and lower and lower. And you're just like, because you don't really have any answers. Fairly contested shots, too, that are just, going in. And it was Warren Washington. I'll get back to Darion in a second, but Warren Washington at the beginning of the second half had a few buckets that I think kind of, you had kind of a 7 or 8-0 run to kind of early in the second half to kind of, take the pressure off or kind of break the string and kind of get you back in the game a bit and kind of get you some confidence. And you needed those points desperately at the time that he was giving them to you because you just didn't really have any answers. And, I think Grant had talked about, in the first half, gotten too deep in the paint. And, this is where Joe and Pop's size sometimes can be a problem. finishing around the rim, or with length and athleticism around them. And Kerwin Walton had a 3-pointer block. They draw up something out of the timeout. I think this was even in the second half, but they good look, and he's 6'3", 6'4", and one of those Kansas State dudes just reaches out, gets a piece of it, and you're just like, this is. I mean, it was real, and down there right close to it, it was extremely physical. Every possession was a fist fight. And I think it got really chippy because in the first half, the officials kind of let them go. Yeah. And then it got chippy, and I think then they had to kind of try to reel it back in a little bit. But part of the chippiness was because it was just everything was allowed to go on, but there weren't many calls being made. So you get around the rim, you kind of throw one up and get hit and try to play through contact. No call. We're going the other way. And I think Kansas State, benefited from that a little bit, the physicality of it. But I think that, you were able to adjust and certainly benefited in the second half a bit. But Darion Williams, he hits a three. I don't know if it was around the 3.5 minute mark, which was big at the time from the corner. And his little 5-point run when you were, at one point when you were down 8, his and one off of a Warren Washington missed free throw was huge, because it turned that possession into a 4-point possession. He makes the free throw, and then he has a drive, a possession or two later, where he gets to the rim, makes both free throws. And, nobody – you mentioned the free throws, and Grant mentioned it too, but nobody missed any free throws in this game for Texas Tech other than Warren, and he was 1 of 4. And he's not your best free throw shooter. He was big in Austin about a week ago at the free throw line, but he was just 1 of 4 here. And as Darion – scoops up that miss with an and one, Warren Washington is just standing at the free throw line with the biggest smile on his face, and everybody's picking up Darion and all that. And I think I said it on the broadcast.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And football is close to wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with America's #1 sports book and the official sports book of Locked On. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place only a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. So many ways to spice up the action with FanDuel's safe, secure, and easy-to-use app. Are you really even parlaying if you're not visiting FanDuel's Parlay Hub? I doubt it. So get to FanDuel.com/lockedon today. And if you're a new customer, take advantage of $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place only a $5 bet with FanDuel at FanDuel.com/lockedon, official partner of the NFL.
I said it on the broadcast. I'm like, it's like you drew up the play and executed it flawlessly. And Warren's just like, yeah, it worked. I mean, which is just wild. But I mean, so many guys to cut, because it was just gutsy, man. And Pop and Joe, as much as they struggled in this game, and I'll make it clear. See, they were 6 of 24 combined from the field. They were 2 of 10 from behind the arc. If I tell you these things before this game, you probably are going, we no chance. Just can't. There's just not a path to score enough points, to be able to get to that point. But they both had a couple of extremely difficult finishes late in that game around the rim. Joe's was an and one opportunity. Pop's was kind of off balance. And at the time of the game, when you're trying to get back into it or get over the hump, you desperately needed those buckets. And credit to them for just not wavering. They just kept fighting and scratching and clawing. So fascinating day at the arena, man. It really was. Because after the game was over, I kept thinking to myself, I don't know how you pulled this off. Like, I really don't. But that building, I think it's fun for me that's been here a long time. And Calvin, you've been around here a long time. You've kind of seen this program, and I'm a bit older than you, but I remember it, in the mid '90s, the Coliseum, and you're just loaded. But there's been a lot of times in that building where you haven't had a good basketball program for years. And to see it kind of come up and then to see this new staff come in, which is why this is a good job. They come in and kind of get to embrace, appreciate, and then use the atmosphere to their advantage is really fun for somebody like me to watch, because all those guys are like, oh, this building's got some juice to it. Yes, it does. On a Saturday afternoon in conference play, you're absolutely right. And it benefited you greatly. So if you were one of the nearly 15,000 people there, man, to, give yourself a hand because you played a huge part in just getting and willing your team back into it. But Grant's kids, man, they just kept fighting.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe we should reduce capacity. Shout out to Matt Nerdlander for that thought. I remember the ebb and flow. I mean, was really great. Obviously waned in the final years of the James Dickey era. Was great under Bob Knight, then was as good as it ever has been in the Chris Beard era. I remember times when it was like a morgue, especially when the students weren't in town, as you get sort of that holiday transition period and some of those pre-Chris Beard eras. But clearly you've got an opportunity to pack in more than a few frothing at the mouth Red Raiders whenever you're doing it like you've been doing it. And yeah, just back to the tenacity and sort of the short memory aspect of this. Shots aren't falling has not been an easy offensive day by any stretch, but with about a minute and a half left, you're getting free throws made from Darion Williams. 30 seconds left, you get a free throw made from Joe Toussaint. That clutch gene, I don't know if it can be taught or coached necessarily. I know that a coach can have an impact on sort of remaining even keeled or forgetting about what didn't go right previously, but in a lot of ways, I'm just crediting the Jimmies and the Joes for being able to step up to the line in those moments when you need it most and knocking them down, man. That's huge.
Grant is a fun guy to be around. He's very mild-mannered at times. He's well-spoken. He's very even keel. But he is extremely hard on some of these kids, like coaching them up and demanding, and it's hard to play for him. I think because of that. But when you embrace it, because this is the best version of Joe Toussaint in his college career. Yes, it's probably because he's older. This is his last hurrah. I mean, how much better is Pop than he was last year? Part of that is just because he's a year older. But both of these guys are doing some things. I mean, like, I think understanding how to manage the game. Not perfect, but understanding, because you hear Grant talk about Joe's patience. And I think there's times when you feel like you're on a break and they're like, oh, nope, I'm going to peel it back a little bit and let's be smart here. Or we don't need this right now. And those are big because you feel the crowd and the roar and you're trying to deliver them something to that's what was working against you early on in the season. I think you're mature enough and all those things now to where it's you've just kind of grown up a bit. And that's what's always fascinating about basketball seasons. I mean, how much different is this basketball team for a variety of reasons, personnel-wise, different roles have been established, players are better than they were, but how much different is it here in mid-January than it was in mid-November when you have a couple of games under your belt? And we're talking about it, trying to project and trying to get a feel for things. That's the fascinating part about a basketball season because it is so long. And you watch the ebbs and the flows. And there's adversity around the corner. You're probably going to get some this week. There's going to be some massive adversity around the corner in this league. But it's fun to watch these guys kind of start to grow a bit under this new staff and head coach. And I don't know, man. I just think when you start figuring out different ways to win games, that's what really – because when you can kind of be a chameleon a bit, and you don't have to have, because I think you come into this one and kind of we had set the recipe in that, and Grant would have told you the same. Like we have to, or you had been low turnover, shoot it well. That'd been part of the recipe. And if we rebounded a bit better, look out. And really, you check the mark on the low turnover game. But you weren't shooting it well. It was one of the worst nights that we'd seen against one of your better opponents that from a shooting standpoint. And you really didn't rebound it well overall until toward the very end. And you kind of tipped it or evened up the scales there. But you could argue that you only really checked one or 1.5 boxes of those three kind of non-negotiables, at least as far as your recipe to a path to a victory. Yeah. And yet you still won. And so I think that's a credit to those kids and that coaching staff for figuring out a way. Because even Grant said it multiple times after the game was over. He's like, I just looked in their eyes and you kind of saw some body language. I just knew we were going to win. He goes, I didn't know how, but I knew we were going to win. And then I don't know what your thoughts were, but you show up to, a stadium or an arena, and there's just so many times when you see something you've never seen before. Right. Never been a part of a game where, I mean, you've got nearly a sold-out crowd. It's a one possession. and there's 7.7 seconds left on the clock, and they throw the ball in, and the clock never rolls. I mean, that was a new one to me, and I thought, what is about to happen here? Like, and then I felt robbed of this fun moment because it was like anticlimactic. It's like, okay, it plays out, and then everybody's like going, what's going on? The clock's not going. I had to come over there, and I knew right next to Haxton and I, the head official, Ray Natili, when he pulled out the stopwatch, because this isn't a PGO, play goes over like when we were in kids out in the street playing flag football or whatever, play goes over, all that stuff. No, this was, they're going to come over there. They're going to, check it and see how much time went off. And thankfully, it's like, hey, game's over, you win. And you're like, okay, now we can celebrate. But just wild ending there. And they had problems, like, for whatever reason during that timeout, because it was, what was it like? You'd scored, and then Kansas State had, I don't know, was it like 30 seconds ish or whatever it was? I think it was pretty close to matched up between shot clock and game clock. And then they get it down and don't get what they want. They call timeout, and so there's 7.2 left. But in the midst of that timeout, the clock, we watched it, and the officials had come over to the scores table. The clock like goes to zero. It just started during the timeout. And so then it took a second for them to kind of throw the ball in because they were trying to get it reset. So it just malfunctioned, I guess. I don't know. The buzzer went off, but that was just another layer into kind of what was a wild ending. But I was just like, oh, this is crazy. Remember in the Bob Knight era when there was some clock issues in Norman, Oklahoma, and Bob Knight?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. See, and you just don't want that attached to you. But luckily, there's no like home cooking. It just malfunctioned, and you actually played the game, and there were 7 seconds that eclipsed. They had a shot, they missed it, you rebounded, game over.
Yeah, it seems like the home cooking is never cooking for the home team in the case of Texas Tech. I thought it was about to be another chapter in the From Here It's Possible book of Red Raider sports experience. And I don't know, once upon a time, I didn't get a look, and I hadn't been down that close in quite some time. But once upon a time, it was like a sweet old gray-haired lady that was the clock keeper. And I thought, this is like intentional, so nobody will ever chew her out. Bull butter. We don't mind getting after a sweet old gray-haired lady in West Texas. Is it the same clock keeper it's always been? And not even that it was their fault. I guess it was a malfunction, but
they are. It is. She's an unbelievable lady. I don't know if she's actually the one you're talking about. I don't know if she's in charge of the clock, but there's like the clock in the book and all that. There's various people that work the table there. This is the way it is on every college campus.
Yeah,
where you just have they're kind of part of the crew. You've got the replay crew, which is in-house. You've got the table crew, which is official book, clock, and all that. But this wasn't their fault. The clock just malfunctioned. It didn't go. It's supposed to like be activated on the whistle, and then go. And it just, for whatever reason, it just didn't.
You don't get the horn. Like the horn is part of the experience, and you get nothing. It's like.
And that went off. That's what was fascinating. Is it like whenever at some point there was a buzzer, I think, that went off, and that's what doesn't make any sense. It's like the buzzer knew when it was supposed to go off, but the clock just didn't. I don't know, but it led to some minor confusion. And we're sitting there, and Haxton and I are right next to the replay crew. But when they came over there and they got the stopwatch, I looked at Haxton. I said, "This game's over," because you had just done the math. The shot didn't go up immediately, and then you rebound it. You were inbounds. There was just no, Grant said after the game, he goes, "I didn't panic. You control what you can control. If anything, we were just going to have to throw the ball in bounds." It was all, but wild, man. Wild. But 3-0, man. You and Baylor sit atop the Big 12 standings after 3 games in what has been a brutal start to conference play for everybody. Just fist fights in all these games, and theoretically, not literally, but it's no result should surprise anyone, really.
No, man. Looking forward to an exciting week. We're seeing a basketball team grow up before our eyes, and you're going to need some grown-up basketball as now you venture away from United Supermarkets Arena. We'll get to what's coming up next for the Red Raiders on tomorrow's episode via some Big 12 in review conversation and a few more as we kick off another week. So appreciate the bonus time here today, Chris, and we'll do it again on the other side.
Hope It's definitely alive, folks. It's cold and all that. That's alive too, but hope remains alive as well. But yeah, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, keep your house warm via the flame of a 3-0 start to Big 12 play. And a few doses of Locked On Texas Tech doesn't hurt as well. The ember's always burning. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us once again. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you back here for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.